Oh, hi. I was just texting on my mid-2000s era telephone, cell phone, I suppose, while enjoying my new 90s style hair. I didn't actually get my hair styled from the 90s. It snowed where I'm at, and it was incredibly cold, so I wore a hat all day. Speaking of snow, have you ever wondered how hard it would be to explain snow to someone who had never seen it, who had no concept of it, hadn't read it, hadn't even seen a picture of it? I want you to think about that for a second as we try and answer today's question. What is it about Heart of Darkness that makes the novel so incredibly difficult to read and understand? Okay, by this point there should be a painting right about here. It could also be here, and I've never done this before, so it might very well be right here. In which case, do not fret, I am not a talking painting. I am still Oxford comma, just with a painting in front of my face. But hopefully it's here. Ish. Somewhere. Over there. Okay, the painting you're looking at is Van Gogh's Irises. The reason I selected this work to show you is it's not quite a picture of irises, right? It's more like colored blobs, but it gives the impression of an iris, hence the post-impressionist or impressionism classification that work of art has. The reason I chose this, even though we're in a novel, is Conrad is doing the same thing with his writing that's done in Van Gogh's Irises, or more famously his Starry Night, or the very famous painting, not by Van Gogh, Nude Descending a Staircase #2, but I can't show you that one because it's not in the public domain. Anyway, you could Google it though. One of the reasons I showed you this impressionist painting is because Conrad does this all the time in his writing, right? What we read for in chapter 2 already, or if hopefully you've been reading or listening attentively, is the attack that takes place. Now this attack is a little vague. You know, it's easy to picture an attack happening, but from Marlowe's perspective in the novel, it's not arrows and spears flying through the air immediately, it's sticks, right? And canes. So why would he do that? Because he's trying to give his readers the idea of what's happening. His readers aren't like us. I mean, we're his readers now, so we are like us, probably. But his readers, his original readers, would not have been like the modern audience. When you hear Belgian Congo, you can picture it in high definition 3D 4K, right? Even if you've never been there. But for the European audience he was writing for, many of them would have no clue what Africa is like, except maybe some grainy black and white footage, or maybe a couple writings, hand-drawn maps, that sort of thing. So for Conrad's audience, he really paints, so to speak, very vividly, so they can picture the Congo. And as you read the novel, it feels like you're trudging through the Belgian Congo, and that attack is quite a startling example of that. That the audience wouldn't know, Marlowe wouldn't know what arrows flying through the air look like. He hadn't seen films where that takes place. So he describes them as sticks, right? Just like the stabbing of the helmsman is so violent and so shocking to him that he thinks it's a cane. He's used to canes, not spears. But of course it is a spear, and it kills his helmsman, right? So that's number one, the type of impression that he's writing with. And why would anyone do this? Because it's this giving the impression of what something is more than just telling it, right? It's a new style, it's a new way of going about things. So just like it became popular in paint, it became popular in writing with Virginia Woolf, William Faulkner, James Joyce, all sorts of other people who were influenced partially by Conrad. One of the other things so difficult about the language in this novel is that it's so figurative, right? And he talks about that with the impression. He says that he felt like he had been captured by something, that Marlowe had been captured. And we can picture someone being captured, right? You can be captured by like a robot chicken, or an invading army, or like a samurai baby. You can picture that in your mind. But what Marlowe says is he felt like he was captured by the impression of a dream. So what's an impression of a dream, right? It takes some mental gymnastics, so to speak, to really figure that out. Like what is a dream? It's kind of real, but also not real. It's very hard to explain. It feels real, but then you look at it in retrospect and it's not. It's fragmented. You usually don't remember all of it. It's almost impossible to narrate to anyone, and all that makes sense for what Marlowe is going through. But for us as readers, it's not that we can passively sit back and let it wash over us. You have to lean forward when you read, right? You have to really dive into the work to figure out what he's talking about. All this impressionism requires frames. And as we've talked about a little bit already with the frame story, Marlowe uses a number of frames. I want you to think about how this novel is set up real briefly here. You have an unnamed narrator sitting on a boat in the Thames telling a story, right? Unnamed narrator, way out here. He's telling us readers a story, and then Marlowe, I don't know if you can see my hands, they might not even be in the frame, but they're out here. Marlowe is telling the unnamed narrator a story, right? So Marlowe's story, unnamed narrator, us reading. I suppose you could say there's 3 frames if you really wanted to. At part of the novel, Marlowe starts talking about something he read that Kurtz wrote. Are we getting this? So we have a story about someone telling a story about a time in their story where they read someone else's essay. So of course this is going to be difficult, and of course that sounds incredibly boring, but Conrad's not a boring writer. There's a reason we still read him. That essay is this eloquent telling of how the white Europeans can act as gods and give amazing gifts of goodness to the Africans because they'll be seen as gods, right? Kind of the opposite of the Spanish conquistadors, not using it to conquer, but to spread civilization and goodness and religion and all those things. And we have all this typed up, and then Conrad tells us through the unnamed narrator, through Marlowe, that at the bottom of this typed pamphlet is this handwritten note scrawled that says, "Exterminate all the brutes," right? And it's this really creepy thing, and it shows this shift that's taken place in Kurtz before we even meet him. But again, it's not easy. But if you're willing to get past the fact that the novel's not easy, it can be incredibly rewarding. It's beautiful, beautiful and scary prose that he's giving you, and if you can get into it, it's incredibly, incredibly. The last and most important impression, and I hope you can follow our three main points here as I've moved the camera 3 times. I don't know if that works or not. But the last important impression I want you to catch on is that of Kurtz himself, right? We're at the end of the chapter, and I'll make another video that outlines more of the plot, but I wanted to talk about more of the nuances of the novel here. The impression we get of Kurtz, if you follow this timeline, we start after the events in Africa. Right, we start way over here after the events in Africa, and as we progress, we find out more and more about the things in the Belgian Congo, and we start getting this picture of Kurtz, this impression, so to speak, of Kurtz, right? Things people have said about him, the painting he made of the woman holding the torch, right? The fact that he brings in all this ivory, these rumors if he's even alive or not, if he's sick, why is the ivory dried up? So we get all these little pieces of the puzzle when it comes to Kurtz, and then Marlowe tells us that Kurtz is in fact alive. We haven't known that really the whole time. So Marlowe tells us Kurtz is in fact alive when he meets him, but now he's dead. So we haven't even met Kurtz yet by the end of chapter 2, but we already know he's dead. And we already know that Marlowe meets him. So Conrad sets up this novel so beautifully that you get everything up to Kurtz, and then you kind of get the stuff after Kurtz. Not everything, but a lot of stuff after Kurtz. So you have this crazy idea of what this person is, and just like Marlowe, the reader's kind of enthralled into really meeting Kurtz, but we're not able to finally meet Kurtz until chapter 3, and that's where we're going to leave off. So I hope those things help you out a little bit. If you think of it like an impressionist painting, if you're able to keep those frames that kind of bound all these figurative language tangents in line, and then if you remember that there's a reward in the difficulty of the novel. We humans were drawn to challenges, right? We love getting to that next level in the video game. We love growing our bank account. We love that promotion, but all those things are challenging most of the time anyway. That doesn't deter us from it. So I encourage you in your studies to not be deterred just because something is challenging. So anyway, we'll probably be back in the classroom in the future, but this is my subterranean apartment or mansion. Who knows? Could be a room in a mansion. Probably is. Anyway, me and my 90s hair are out. Have a good one.